Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Fourth and Long podcast with your host, Alec Pecano, on Monday, October 14th. After a crazy week of college football, we are officially back after having no internet for 12 days. Today's show is a very, very busy show. I will talk about Ohio State's game against Oregon last Saturday. I'll talk about if Sam Pittman has saved his job and a lot more. But let's get started tonight with the first order of business. And we're going to talk about the situation at Florida with their quarterbacks. And first, I want to send my thoughts and prayers out to Graham Mertz. Get speedy recovery, Graham Mertz. He injured his leg against Tennessee Saturday night. And I don't think that for all the discredit I give Graham Mertz, he was having a good season, and I feel like I need to give him credit, even though, as you know, I am not a Gator fan, but we talk about everything on the podcast, and I feel like Graham Mertz has had a relatively good season for Florida, and I feel like this injury does open door now for DJ Lagway to take the team, to take the keys and run with the offense for the Gators. And maybe we see Florida hit another gear with DJ Lagway as quarterback. Like I just said, Graham Mertz, he had a good season. And I was not a big fan of the 2 QB system that Billy Napier was running, but now this is all DJ Lagway's team, and let's see what Florida could do with this week against Kentucky. And believe me, you'll see. I do have a watch party this weekend on Saturday at 7:30, Texas and Georgia. We were supposed to have a couple last week. I decided not to. And I probably should have for Ohio State, Oregon, but we didn't. But we will for sure this week with Georgia and Texas. The next thing I'm going to talk about is, has Sam Pittman bought himself another year in Fayetteville? I believe he has. Arkansas is 4-2 to start the season. They get LSU this week. That's not going to be an easy game after seeing what LSU did to Ole Miss last week. But I think that Sam Pittman has potentially gave himself a chance at getting one more year in Fayetteville with Arkansas instead of getting the boot and getting fired. Now, that's not to say if they finish the season horribly that he won't be canned and he won't get fired. I have a video coming up this week, later this week, possibly on maybe Thursday, probably Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday night of potential coaching replacements for some guys that are on the hot seat, and Sam Pittman is one of them. So be looking out for that video later on this week. And the other thing I've been surprised of is Taylen Green of Arkansas. He has played really well for Arkansas, and I'm shocked that Taylen Green isn't getting more love from the SEC. And I was not expecting this from Taylen Green at all. I watched some of his tape at Boise State. He was a pretty good quarterback. He just didn't have he had decent wide receivers, but now that he's at Arkansas, it seems like he's got a lot better weapons. And Bobby Petrino actually knows what he's doing. And I'm going to admit right now, I was wrong on Arkansas. I was way off with my prediction in the preseason on Arkansas only winning 4 games. Now, we could see Arkansas just fall apart. And yes, 4 is their 4. They only end up with 4 wins. But the way they're playing, I think they will win at least 2 or 3 more games this year and finish with maybe 7-4. And if you're an Arkansas fan, I wouldn't be disappointed in that at all. It's a step up from the first 2 years under Sam Pittman. And again, like I just said, this is the best we've seen Arkansas play the last 2 years. And this is the best record they've had through their first however many games they've played. And later on in the show, you're going to see my rankings. And you might see Arkansas in those rankings. But now, I'm going to go over some games from last week. And the first one was, we're going to start with Texas and Oklahoma. And I'm going to be honest with y'all here. Texas is a serious threat for the national championship. Quinn Ewers in his return went 20 of 29, 199 yards, touchdown and a pick. 77.7 QBR rating. Nothing to really say there. Rushing the ball. Quintivion Wisner, 13 carries, 118 yards, and a touchdown. Look at that average yards per rush. 9.1. That's absurd. And then you had Jaden Blue, 10 carries, 30 yards, no touchdown. You had Quinn Ewers had a rushing touchdown as well. Slade Bolden had a rushing touchdown. Receiving, Gunnar Helm, 5 for 91 in a touchdown. Ryan Wingo, 2 catches, 49 yards. 3 for DeAndre Moore Jr., Matthew Golden with a catch. And Matthew Golden also had a completion. Jaden Blue had 3 catches, 4 catches for Wisner. Isaiah Bond had a catch on 5 targets. Slade Bolden also had a catch. And Juan Davis had 1 catch for 3 yards. Now we're going to switch over to the Oklahoma side. Okay. And I'm gonna say something here. Brett Venables, you need to go back to Jackson Arnold. Michael Hawkins is not ready to be a starting quarterback in the SEC yet. And he's already played 2 games. So you've got 2 more games to decide if you want him to burn his red shirt and risk losing his red shirt for this year. If I was you, I would sit down to freshmen and say, look, we're redshirting you rest of the season because we don't want to lose the ability to redshirt you if we play you 4 games and then we decide you're going to be our QB the rest of the season. I think you need to go back to Jackson Arnold because he gives you the best chance to score points. You only put up 3 points against Texas. And this was supposed to be one of the games of the week. And this was an embarrassment for Oklahoma. And Oklahoma fans, I want to know what you have to say in the comments, in the comment section. The silver lining here is, and then this is the other thing with a freshman quarterback. Why is he running the ball 20 times and only getting 27 yards? Why? I need you to explain that to me, Brett Venables. What's the thinking there? Why is your quarterback running the ball 20 times? That is one way to get your quarterback hurt. Tatum had 17 yards rushing, and then you had Barnes, Javonte Barnes, 14 for 38. Oklahoma just had no offense. It's that simple, as evidenced by the receivers. You had two guys with 3 catches, one guy with 2 catches, one guy with 4 catches, and look at the the longest reception was 15 yards for Oklahoma. I'm sorry, that's embarrassing. Brett Venables, you have some thinking to do. Again, like I just said a minute ago, and I know I'm reiterating myself over and over, I think you need to go back to Jackson Arnold. He gives you the best chance not only to score points, but to win football games. And if you want to compete in the SEC, you need a quarterback that is experienced. And Jackson Arnold is experienced. Not saying that Michael Hawkins can't be that in a couple years. He's not that right now. He needs more development. The next game we're going to review is Ohio State and Oregon. And I watched every single second of this game. Will Howard, and I will talk about in depth about the Ohio State side of it later on in the show. But Will Howard did have a really good game. No turnovers. He had 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, 28 of 35 passing. He had a rushing touchdown as well. So he had 3 total TDs. And he had a good game, and so did the offense. And like I said a minute ago, I will in depth talk about Ohio State later on in the show. But overall, this game was really good. Ohio State had a chance to win it in the last minute. And I will give my thoughts and opinion on what they should have done different later on. Looking at Oregon, Dillon Gabriel, 341 yards, 2 TDs, and a rushing TD. So he also had a 3 TD game. And Jordan James ran for 115 yards. Ohio State's rush defense, and again, I will exclusively talk about Ohio State in the next segment block. But this was a great game, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be the Big Ten championship game. There's a couple more games that we're going to talk about. I'm going to go to the Big 12. And we're going to talk about Arizona State and Utah. And so we're going to start on the Utah side of it first. Cam Rising struggled. Just look at it. I mean, not passing yards wise, but he had no touchdowns. He had 3 interceptions, a 29.4 QBR, which is not good at all. And I might have to make an admission here and say Utah might not make the conference championship game in the Big 12 in their first year. But Lakai Bernard had a good game. He had a rushing touchdown and 129 yards rushing. Receiving wise, Dorian Singer had 4 catches for 75 yards. 5 catches, 61 yards for Bernard. Brant Keithy had 3 catches for 44 yards, 3 for 19 for Money Parks. And Micah Pittman had 1 catch for 10 yards. Now, we're going to talk about Arizona State, and I was way off with my prediction on Arizona State this year. 5-1. I think we need to start taking Arizona State a lot more serious. Sam Levitt, 154 yards passing on 18 pass attempts with 1 touchdown, 1 pick. You had Cam Scotabo, 22 carries, 158 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Jeff Sims did have a rushing touchdown. And Sam Levitt had 6 carries for 22 yards. DeCarlos Brooks chipped in with 3 carries for 15 yards. Jake Smith had a carry for 8 yards. So 4 different guys had a rush attempt. Jordan Tyson, 5 for 84 and a touchdown. 16.8 yards per reception. That is crazy. Xavier Gilroy, 1 catch for 27 yards. And then you had Shimon Mateo, 1 catch for 8 yards, and DeCarlos Brooks, 1 catch for 7 yards. Looking overall at this game, Arizona State almost choked it away and lost. But somehow they won, and I think we need to start taking Arizona State a lot more serious. I think Arizona State is a dark horse now in the Big 12 to win, not only win the Big 12, but to represent the Big 12 in the college football playoff. And now we get to the second part of the show. And the first thing I'm going to go in depth about, I'm going to switch it up. I was supposed to do game picks first, but we're going to talk about, like I said, we're going to talk about Ohio State first. And I'm going to tell you what I would have done different on that last drive. And some of the questionable penalty calls and the play calling by Ohio State's offense and the Oregon coaching staff and their defense. So first of all, like I said in the review of Ohio State, Oregon, I thought Ohio State played a really good game, but it just didn't make sense to me with a minute left. Why aren't you throwing the ball the entire time and doing little dink and dunk passes to get 5 to 10 yards and get out of bounds? That last play didn't make sense at all. The Will Howard taking off and running and sliding. And Ohio State did try to call a timeout. But Oregon and the referees did not grant that timeout. What does that tell you about officiating? They wanted the game to end. They didn't want it to continue. They wanted it to end. And I'm sorry, but the officiating was awful, especially that last drive. For example, there was a defensive pass interference that should have been called that wasn't called, but then yet when Jeremiah Smith just outmans his defender, somehow it's called offensive pass interference. It make sense. And then the whole 12th man on the field for Oregon, they did that on purpose because they wanted to stop us because they know we were going up tempo because we only had 1 timeout left. And to me, that's not right for Oregon to do that. But overall, Ohio State, they have some things to work on going into their bye week. And I think if they fix those things, they will be just fine. They will be just fine. They will be at the top of the Big Ten. And I don't get this blasphemy that people want Ryan Day fired. They want Chip Kelly fired. They want Jim Knowles fired. Listen, it's one loss. Deal with it and move on. Deal with the loss and move on. We will see Oregon again in the Big Ten championship game. Simple and easy as that. Now we get to my game picks for week number 8. And we start in the Big Ten, and we've got a Friday game. Oregon and Purdue. To me, this pick is very, very simple and easy. It is Oregon. Purdue is awful. Purdue does not deserve to be competing at all. And I don't know how I think they played somebody last week and almost won. Oh, I think it was Illinois. I think they almost beat Illinois. As a matter of fact, I could go back and look at last week. Big Ten. And they almost beat Illinois last week. How? And you're telling me that the Associated Press has Illinois in their top 25. As you can see, I do my top 25 every week. Have I had Illinois ranked? No. Because I don't think Illinois is a top 25 team. And I think Oregon is going to destroy Purdue this week. Then we get to our Saturday games, and it's a lighter schedule on Saturday in the Big Ten. We've got Nebraska and Indiana, two teams that are ranked in my rankings. I'm taking Indiana. Indiana's another team that I might be off with in my. Oh, I am. Actually, I am off with in my preseason prediction. I only had Indiana going 5-7 in Kirk Cignetti's first year as head coach, and they've already outdone that 5 wins. I think they upset Nebraska this week, but that's not one of my upset picks. You'll see all of those coming up in a minute. But then you have Rutgers looking to bounce back after losing last week. And they're playing UCLA. I think this is going to be a high-paced, good game, but give me Rutgers. And the last Big Ten game we've got is Wisconsin and Northwestern. Give me Wisconsin. I was scared for Wisconsin after they lost Tyler Van Dyke, but I think Wisconsin is going to be perfectly fine with Braden Locke as quarterback. Now we get to the AAC, and there's some decently good games that are kind of flying under the radar this week in the AAC. We start with Army and East Carolina. This is not one of the games flying under the radar. I think Army's going to win this game very easily. And the player to watch for Army is Bryson Daniels. 3 rushing touchdowns last week. Can he continue that dominance this week? I believe he can. The next one is Tulsa and Temple. Now, this might take the cake for being the worst game of the week in the AAC and all of college football. I'm taking Tulsa. Stan Drayton, I don't understand how he still is employed at Temple as the head coach. He needs to be fired. And I think he might get fired after this game if they lose. The next game is Navy and Charlotte. Navy's undefeated. Do they lose this week? I don't think so. I think they win against Charlotte and a laugher. Then you've got South Florida and UAB. Now, we saw last week how picking USF didn't go well. I believe they will be playing at home this week against UAB in Tampa. Give me USF to get their first conference win and beat UAB because they were displaced from the Storm last week in Orlando at Camping World Stadium, and it didn't look like they wanted to be there. And then we've got Rice and Tulane. This is another one that I don't think is going to be much of a game. Give me Tulane in a blowout. Then you've got Florida Atlantic and UTSA. Give me UTSA. I do like the spread in this game, and you will see who I like on the point spread in a little bit. And then the last game in the AAC that I've got is North Texas and Memphis. Speaking of the team USF played last week, they played Memphis. And I am taking Memphis. I need to start taking Memphis more serious. Their quarterback, Seth Hennigan, even though he's been around a long time, he's a really good quarterback. And I just can't see Memphis losing many more games, if any. They might end up in the American Championship game if Army or Navy loses a game in conference, which I don't see that happening until they play each other, and that's not going to be a conference game. Now we get to the SEC, and the game of the week in the SEC is Tennessee and Alabama. And I am picking Tennessee to win this game. Now, in the comments, y'all can put who you think is going to win these games that I do game picks for or upsets for. The next one is Texas A&M and Mississippi State. I'm going with the Aggies. Give me Texas A&M. I think Mississippi State's maybe 1 or 2 years from being extremely competitive in the SEC, and I like A&M to win. Missouri and Auburn. Give me Missouri. I don't think what people realize is I think I was wrong with Payton Thorne. He had a good game last time out for Auburn, but I think this is going to be closer than people think. I think it might be a one-score final score, a one-score game to end the game between Missouri and Auburn. Then we've got South Carolina and Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma's coming off of a loss to Texas, and a bad loss at that. Do they bounce back? My heart was telling me go with Oklahoma, but I like what South Carolina's done this year. So give me South Carolina. And a close game, hopefully, and it's not like it was last week against Texas. LSU, Arkansas. Now, I wanted to take Arkansas on the upset here, but I got to go LSU. Garrett Nussmeier looked really good last week, and I think it's safe to say that LSU might backdoor their way into the SEC championship game. So give me LSU. Vanderbilt and Ball State. This is the easiest pick of them all. And if Vandy loses this game, which they shouldn't, but they have the tendency to lose games like this, I'm taking Vanderbilt. Texas and Georgia is the other big game in the SEC this week. Give me Texas. And after we are done with this segment of game picks, I'm going to talk a little bit about Georgia and how I feel about Kirby Smart. And then we've got Kentucky and Florida. Give me Kentucky to not only beat Florida, but upset the Gators. I might have just spoiled one of my picks against the spread, but who cares? Okay, now we go to the ACC, and we've got Boston College and Virginia Tech Thursday night. I'm going Virginia Tech because I still think there's an outside chance with chaos that Virginia Tech can end up in the ACC championship game. Now, they would need a lot to happen for that situation, that yeah, that scenario to happen. Can it? We've seen crazier things happen. But give me Virginia Tech. Friday, we've got Florida State and Duke. Easy pick here for me. Give me Duke. Florida State is on their downfall needs to be studied. This is the worst I've seen a team be after getting left out of the college football playoff. Now they probably wish that the 12 team playoff started last year. Because if it did, they probably would have still been in. We go to Saturday. We've got Clemson and Virginia. Give me Clemson. I do think Virginia does keep it close. Closer than people maybe think. And they make Clemson sweat it out until the fourth quarter. And then Clemson ends up pulling away. We've got UConn and Wake Forest. Now, if this was a basketball game, I'd be more inclined to pick Wake Forest. I'm going UConn. UConn's had a surprisingly good season, and I think their good season continues here against Wake Forest. And Dave Clawson's hot seat's got to be getting up there. I don't know how he's getting away with losing games and taking money away from the boosters at Wake Forest, but his hot seat's got to be getting hot. Then you've got Miami, Florida, and Louisville. Now, I wanted to take Louisville, but even though I don't believe in Miami, I'm going with the Canes. Give me Miami. Georgia Tech and Notre Dame. Give me Georgia Tech. I think Notre Dame is in a look-ahead spot here because I think they play a big game in a couple weeks against either Clemson or Florida State. And if it's Florida State, it's not that big of a game. But still, they might be looking ahead to other teams on their schedule, which, again, we know what happens if you look ahead. Look a couple years back at Ohio State when they played at Purdue in the Tyler Trent game. They were looking ahead to the rest of their schedule, and Purdue throttled them. Now, can the same thing happen with Notre Dame this week against Georgia Tech? I believe it can. I think Notre Dame's looking ahead to a bigger game, and maybe Georgia Tech catches them, and they upset and beat them. And then you've got Cal and North Carolina State. Now, if Grayson McCall was starting this game for North Carolina State, I'd go North Carolina State. But I think I have to buy into what California is doing, to what Cal Berkeley is doing. So give me the Bears. Give me the Cal Golden Bears. SMU and Stanford. This is an easy pick. No pun intended to the Stanford man. Give me SMU. The Big 12 on Friday night. We've got Oklahoma State and BYU. I am never picking against Mike Gundy again. It is not safe to do. Give me Oklahoma State. Arizona State and Cincinnati. Give me Arizona State, and I think Arizona State puts the hurts on them, on Cincinnati. If you looked at Cincinnati and if you looked at the score of the Cincinnati game last week, Cincinnati barely won. They only won 19-13 against UCF. If they pull that same thing this week against Arizona State, I think they get throttled. Now, if I'm wrong on any of these picks, come back and tell me that I should have picked the other team. Kansas and Houston. I'm taking Kansas here, but I guess I could say I'm like 90% confident in Kansas winning, but they haven't won a lot of games this year. Lance Leipold might get fired, or he might leave for a bigger job. Texas Tech and Baylor. I'm taking Texas Tech here. They're at home, and Baylor, Dave Aranda's got Baylor at 2 wins. I think Baylor's not going to win any more games this year. and I'm gonna pick against Baylor the rest of the year. And it might be fool's gold. Baylor might win this game, but I don't see it. I think Baylor's going to lose to Texas Tech. Then you've got Colorado and Arizona. I'm taking Colorado coming off that loss to Kansas State. I think Colorado's going to be upset, and they're going to want to win and beat the absolute tar out of Arizona. And this is sad because I was hot. Arizona was my other team to make the Big 12 championship game, and I might be wrong on that. Kansas State and West Virginia. Give me K-State coming off an emotional win against Colorado. And I think K-State keeps it going and they beat West Virginia. Then you've got Iowa State and UCF. Give me Iowa State. We've already seen what happened with UCF. They had 5 guys jump in red shirt for the rest of the season with intentions of hopping into transfer portal. And that's not a good sign. And they started a kid that was 17 years old at quarterback last week, which I mentioned on one of the previous shows. If you want to go back and watch that show, you can, where I had 4 guys that were lower on the depth chart. And EJ Collison for UCF was one of them. And I called that. I said he might be taking over at quarterback for UCF. And he started last week against Iowa State, but then they benched him for some reason. But I think Gus Malzahn is going to turn to the 17-year-old for UCF against Iowa State this week. And then the last game of the Big 12 is TCU and Utah. I think the other downfall that needs to be studied is Utah. They're 4-2. Cam Rising might get another year of eligibility, which is crazy. But I think TCU wins this game somehow. Now we get to the Mid-American Conference. We get to the MAC. We've got Central Michigan and Eastern Michigan. So it's a battle of Central and Eastern Michigan. I'm going to take Central Michigan to beat Eastern Michigan. In a close, hard-fought game, give me Central Michigan. Bowling Green and Kent State. Give me Bowling Green. Kent State is horrific. Bowling Green was one of my sleeper teams in the MAC. And they're doing all right this year, actually. The team I'm disappointed in is the next one I'm going to talk about. It's Ohio versus Miami of Ohio. The Battle of I-75. Give me Miami of Ohio to get their 3rd one of the year and stay in the race for the MAC East. Toledo and Northern Illinois. Toledo is coming off a game they shouldn't have lost last week, but they did. I'm taking Toledo over Northern Illinois. Give me the Rockets. And the last game of game picks is Vanderbilt and Ball State. Give me Vandy. Same thing with the SEC. Yeah. Okay. So now we already did that. Well, now I'm going to show you my rankings. So my rankings for week 8 of the college football season. At number 25, welcome back to my rankings, Arizona State. I had taken them out for 1 week because they lost, but they are back in there. We know how this goes. We're 8 weeks into the season. We know the rules of the rankings. I shouldn't have to review them. At Arizona State, like I said, I think, not just me, but I think all our MVPs here with this YouTube channel, we need to all start taking Arizona State serious. They're no joke anymore. I think they're the darling of the Big 12. They're the team that nobody's talking about in the Big 12. And I think more people need to be talking about them. Number 24 is Liberty. And yes, Liberty is a group of 5 team that if they go undefeated, I think they will be in the playoff. They might get that 12 seed and get the last spot in the playoff. At number 23, I just mentioned him earlier and how their coach might have saved his job. Sam Pittman in Arkansas, 4-2, number 23 in my rankings. They get LSU this week. At number 22, another team that I was kind of high on this year, but I didn't know they were going to be this good. It is Georgia Tech. 5-2. And near the top of the ACC. Georgia Tech, we might have to start taking them serious. Western Kentucky is at number 21, 5-1 on the year. Big game against Sam Houston State. Sam Houston this week. And Western Kentucky is another team that group of 5, they could sneak into the playoff if they went out. Lower chance of that. At number 20 is a team that was in, I believe that was in the rankings earlier this year before they got upset by Syracuse. UNLV. The running Rebs of UNLV at 5-1. Another team that's consistently been in the rankings the last few weeks. Number 19, James Madison. The Dukes, 5-1. No Jordan McLeod, no problem, as I've said a couple times. I think James Madison is a serious Sun Belt contender. At number 18 is 4-2 Wisconsin. Wisconsin, like I mentioned earlier in game picks, I think they're going to be just fine without Tyler Van Dyke. Braden Locke looks like a really good quarterback. Number 17, Army. The Army. The Armed Forces at number 17 and number 16. Both undefeated. And I'm surprised. They both struggled the last year. Navy struggled, and so did Army. Now, Army was pretty good last year. But for both of them to be undefeated and this high in our rankings tells you how much people actually, not us, because we kind of said they were going to be competitive this year in the AAC. At number 15 is Pittsburgh, 6-0. And I think Pitt's another team that could sneak their way into the ACC championship game if they continue to win. At number 14 is another team, first year in the ACC. No one saw this coming. SMU at 5-1. They have 2 good quarterbacks. I don't think Preston Stone is going anywhere. I don't think he's going to transfer. I think that I think SMU is a dark horse in the ACC. At number 14, I'm going to admit right now, like I said earlier, I'm wrong. Indiana, 6-0. Big game this week against Nebraska, which you do see where Nebraska is in my rankings, and I will get into them in a second. At number 12 is Miami, 6-0. The only reason they're at number 12 is because the 2 games before their bye week, that was last week, they almost lost. They almost lost to Cal. They needed a comeback for that. And they needed a botched Hail Mary attempt against Virginia Tech. That if that was counted as a touchdown, Miami probably loses that game in overtime to Virginia Tech. At number 11 is Tennessee, 5-1. They beat They won last week against Florida, even though it took overtime. So I only moved them up one spot. I think all of us, me and all the MVPs, we need to rethink Clemson. We need to rehash our step on Clemson because we were all wrong, including me, and I will admit it. I wasn't this high on Clemson. At number 9 is Alabama. Yes, I know they should be in the top 5, but they've got a chance this week to be in the top 5 as they play number 11 Tennessee. Alabama snuck by South Carolina thanks to a failed 2-point conversion by South Carolina last week. South Carolina gets that 2-point conversion. We were looking at overtime, and we were looking at a potential for Alabama's second loss. Business circuit. So you got 8-man PPR: Kyler Murray, Jordan Mason, Derrick Henry, Marv, Debo, McBride, Connor, J-Mo, Bench, Josh Downs, Demario Douglas, Dak, A-Chain, Puka. Should I make the Henry for CD and Cup move with this roster? Yes. I would say yes because you've got Devon A-Chain on your bench. And even though he's in a committee backfield, I would say yes. Because then you have both the Rams receivers. And the other thing I would do is I would see if the guy you're making a trade with has a quarterback that's better than Dak. Because I don't trust Dak rest of the season. And if anybody else has any questions, please put them in the comment. Please put them in the comment section. I will answer them during the stream. And Wednesday, which 2 days from today, on Wednesday, I have an exclusive fantasy football stream where I go over all my fantasy football teams. I would do that trade. Yes. If you're able to get Jordan Love, yes. If you can include Dak in the trade, absolutely. Wednesday morning, I will have a fantasy football stream, exclusive fantasy football stream where I talk about fantasy football and give you advice, just like I just gave the business circuit. Is this a 1 QB league or a super flex? If it's super flex, you can start both. If it's one quarterback, the way I look at it is if it's a 1 quarterback league, I start the guy with the best matchups. If it's single quarterback PPR. So what I would do is I would go depending on the matchup. If Kyler has a good matchup, I'd go Kyler. If Jordan Love has a good matchup, I'd go Jordan Love. Play at that point, you play the matchups. At number 8 in my rankings is Georgia. Georgia had a good game last week. The only reason I moved Ole Miss down as low as I did to number 7 the thing with Kyler this week is he might not have Marvin Harrison. So that scares me a little bit on that front. So if you get Love, I'd go Jordan Love this week because look what Drake May just did to that Texans defense. At number 6 is Nebraska. Nebraska has been a big surprise this year in year 2 under Matt Rule. And I believe that Nebraska is another sleeper in the Big Ten. At number 5, and I only moved them down 3 spots, Ohio State. A 1-point loss to Oregon. And I like I said earlier, I think we're going to see a rematch of Ohio State and Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. At number 4 is Kansas State. They are in my top 4 now. Kansas State, Avery Johnson, the real deal at number 3. And some people might say this is fraudulent. It is Penn State. I knew they had an overtime game that they had to win against USC, but they won. And I would take that any day of the week. And number 2 for me is Texas. And this is strictly to do with who they played last week. They played a bad Oklahoma team, and they beat them 34-3. And Texas is now number 2 in my rankings. Number 1 is Oregon. A 1-point win against the good Ohio State team. I give Oregon credit where it's due. They did play really good. Dan Lanning is a genius head coach for that onset, whatever you want to call it, that he pulled off when they had the kickoff from the 50-yard line. That was a genius play. I give Dan Lanning full credit. And now we're going to talk about my surprise team in the SEC, Vanderbilt. I didn't think I was going to be saying that at the beginning of the season. I really didn't. I thought that Vandy wasn't going to be this good. They're 1-1 away from being ranked. They were ranked in my rankings earlier this year. Does that mean they can be ranked again after this week? Possibly, if they beat Ball State. If they beat Ball State, we might see them ranked next week. I was very utterly surprised at how good Vandy's been this year. Now we get to my upset picks for this week. And my first upset pick is Louisville +4 to upset Miami. Yes, I know I picked Miami to win, and I think they're going to win, but if there's an upset, I think Louisville is going to be the one to pull the upset on Miami +4. Then we've got TCU +6.5 to upset Utah. Self-explanatory here. Obviously. Did I pick Louisville? I think I did. But, and then my last upset is Tennessee +2.5 to upset Alabama. Look at what Alabama did last week. Almost lost to South Carolina. They only beat them by 2 points. And that is very worrisome. Here's my picks against the spread for week number 8. Kentucky +2.5 to cover against Florida. Florida's moved to a new quarterback in DJ Lagway, who we did see earlier in the year. But I think Kentucky covers this spread. Florida Atlantic +4 to cover against UTSA. I sneakily think UTSA wins this game, but I think FAU covers the point spread. We've got Arizona State +3, so plus a field goal, which is 3 points, obviously, to cover against Cincinnati. Like I said earlier, Cincinnati barely beat UCF last week. And I think Arizona State's easily going to cover that point spread. Then you got Western Kentucky plus a field goal to cover against Sam Houston. I think they cover too. And then my last pick against the spread is Georgia State +9 to cover against Marshall. Marshall has been horrendous this year. And I think Charles Huff, even though I like his quote that he made before the Ohio State game, I think he might be on the chopping block. And I think Georgia State's going to cover. And then here's my over-under predictions. First batch of all of these picks. My over-under picks for week 8. First one is Texas State versus Old Dominion. Total is 62.5 points. And I like over 62.5 points. Texas State can score in bunches. And I think they're going to score a whole lot of points against Old Dominion. Then you've got Tennessee and Alabama. Two teams that can score a lot of points, and I think they're going to score a lot of points. The total is 56 right now. And I like the over here of over 56 points. And then, of course, I said earlier, I'm taking Iowa State over UCF. And look at the UCF Iowa State total is 48.5 right now. And I do not care for taking the over in this game. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think it might be 19-13 again. So give me the under of 48.5 points. And if you've enjoyed this video so far, please remember to leave a thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment, turn the notification bell on so you don't miss a future upload. Because I've got one more video coming tonight at 10 o'clock. But we're going to talk now about Army and Navy and how good both of those teams have been this year. Both undefeated. And people are saying their game at the end of the year could have could have college football playoff implications. I think it could. And I honestly think it should have playoff implications. Even though it's not a conference game. I do think that Army and Navy have been the brightest of bright spots this year in the AAC. And I think that it's very likely that they compete for the coming years in the AAC. And they don't leave for another conference. And maybe at some point we get Air Force in the American. And I know Air Force right now has said they're going to stay put in the Mountain West. But as we've learned, money goes a long way. If they get the right amount of money to get themselves out of the Mountain West, they will do it. And they will join either the AAC or another conference, maybe the Pac-12. And I think what the AAC is waiting for is for the day when the ACC ends up dissolving. So some of these AAC teams like Memphis, South Florida, Tulane, UTSA, they can get the invite from the ACC when the ACC inevitably loses Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and maybe somebody else in North Carolina State to either the Big Ten or the SEC. Because that's another thing that's going on right now, is there's a rumor out there that Greg Sankey and the Big Ten commissioner have been talking, and they want to form they want to schedule games between the SEC and the Big Ten in the regular season. And I think that would benefit both conferences, honestly. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of the Fourth and Long podcast. I will see you back here at 10 o'clock for the first episode of the Four Quarters podcast. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday.